for joining us. And thank you to our panelists today, Dr. Roger Martinez Davila and Georgina Garza, and myself. And soon Genie Milgrom will be joining us as well. We thought it was a good place in the middle to take a little break and kind of just open it up to some concepts, open it up to what you want to talk about, and maybe it might be a whole nother session afterwards. I don't know. But for right now, there are just some concepts that we thought could be clarified a little bit, and we encourage you to. And we please make sure that you know this is kind of a break in the middle. We are going to be continuing next week with our hands-on learning, and I actually had it already, so give me 1 minute, I'm going to show you. We have 2 sessions coming up with Professor Renee Levine-Melamed, and she is absolutely wonderful. She has written, I think, 2 or 3 books, I don't remember, about conversos. Her main focus is usually women, and she spoke about the conversos at that point, and also the B'nai Anusim today, the women and their roles in it. So she's going to first start with an overview of crypto-Judaism in Castile, and then she'll continue the next week following up.
It's such a, for so many scholars, I would just say, for so many scholars, her book, one of her books is just like, is the authoritative text really to kind of understand this. I mean, she's so insightful. She's a giant. So I had forgotten she's coming up next week. I've got to put it on my schedule.
Yeah, please do go. Yeah, it should be.
Hi guys, Drora, could you turn on my camera?
Yeah, I don't know why. That's so weird.
Hi guys.
Hey. So Genie has just joined us. Thank you for joining. Sorry.
Yeah, because it says the host has, you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Okay, but now I've invited everyone to be able to do it.
Yeah, it's just a little funny like a hiccup today in the system. Yeah.
But now everyone can open. I mean, anybody who agreed to be a panelist can open.
Okay, I'm not. Let's see. Let's see. There. Hi everyone.
Hi.
Good to see you, Roger.
Lovely to see you, Genie.
Hi, Georgina.
Hello. I've been thinking about maybe we can talk about this in the question and answer about genealogy stopping around the 1300s, where genealogists don't have access to all these archives and records. Is anyone advocating for us so we can? I know Dr. Milgrom is advocating for getting a lot of records digitalized, but
You mean 1300s like 1295, or you mean 1300s like 1395?
Probably like 1395, or any records that we can have access to.
Wait, before we jump into that, I just want to make sure that everybody here understands our panelists today, their focus is really, and I know, Roger, you have a little greater than that, but we mostly focus on the ones that came to the New World, many of them as crypto Jews. So when Georgina is asking about the 1300s and tracing your own lineage, the concept behind it is, I'm assuming, and tell me if I'm wrong, are those that came here, because in the Sephardi world, you'll have the Spanish Portuguese that kept the religion, that went to England, went to France, went to Italy, went to also to the Americas, and now you have them in Israel, you have them all over the world, but that's a very different genealogy and a different, well, sorry, they do cross when you go back, but at this point, it's a different genealogy. And through Amsterdam.
Yeah, I want to touch on this a second with Roger, because I think that before we move on to the New World, because both Roger and I I think we're searching in the same time periods and practically Roger searching the same family with Icarabahas and such. But I found that the furthest back on the Iberian Peninsula, that was, I'll use the word easy, but it's never easy, right? Would be about 1390, 1391, when all those, wars began and they were, beaten down. I don't want to use the word pogrom. It's an Ashkenazi word, but it's, that's when that happened. Are you agreeing with that, Roger?
Again, hi, I'm Professor Roger Martinez Davila. It's good to be here. I would consider Genie like an expert in archives in Iberia and a lot of other places. Just want to make the point, she has spent more time in archives than most of the historians I know. So
Thanks, Roger.
no, it's true. I mean, I think the best researchers out there are the ones that have this deep connection to it and actually put their, feet on the ground. So thank you, Genie. I would just say, it's really there's a kind of a bifurcation sometimes we see in the peninsula, and I'm really limited, right? I'm limited in the sense of I really focus on Castile, so Western Spain, as opposed to Catalonia and Barcelona. And there really is kind of there's kind of a wall of you can't really get further back really from the 1300s. The book starts to be just an absence of records. And the reason why is because the place where you store these, the only safe place, are usually our cathedrals. And cathedrals really don't show up in Europe until the 1200s as a structure, really, a major structure where they can be safely preserved. So that is kind of like that wall you hit. Other things will show up then in municipal archives. It can be a little bit earlier, maybe as early as 1200, maybe 1100, but it's really, really rare. And I think, Jeannie, is that your experience too? Have you
Yeah,
ever?
it is my experience. And what is it? Those archives in Girona, is it, that are locked up inside that cathedral in the turret? I thought I was going to have a heart attack climbing the stairs to that turret. I don't have, I, I am not in shape enough for the turrets of the cathedrals in Spain, but in Girona, in that turret, behind lock and key, there are incredible amounts of records. So yes, and they're still, like, for example, Cuenca. And we'll move on from the Iberian Peninsula, but Cuenca is under all of the Inquisition records, for example, are under the purview of the Archbishop, who I've had it out with. I even spoke to the Pope about it, specifically about the. Well, I feel sorry, he's sick and he's such a nice guy, but Georgina, it's really difficult, to go back to your question. It's extremely, extremely difficult. However, I do want to remind everyone that's listening that on my website, where it says records from Israel, I managed to have the Israeli National Library digitize. Well, I had to pay for it, but managed, everything, But anyway, there are records there that go back to the year 1100. And I organized it. There's thousands of records on my website and thousands that I still have to put up. And I managed to put like Church of Avila. And yes, thank you. You'd have to find it in there. Church of Avila and Portugal. So there are the actual records in there, and you'd really have to get in there. Let me try to see this. You'd really have to get into it, but it says, there's thousands in there. So, my website has so much stuff that you'd really have to spend a couple months there and just bring, refill your coffee, to be able to see everything that's in there. But I think, Georgina, if you're looking for specific stuff, it may show up here in the Israel National Library records.
Thank you.
Maybe another piece just to add on to that. I mean, that's one of the big challenges I think that Genie has really taken on, which is how do you get these records that are available into a digital format? The general rule of thumb for a lot of these records that we want to find, And this is after, working with like, with National Directors Archives in Spain, is just about 10% of the collections are actually digitized. So although we might go on to and find some finding aids, so these are just like indexes of documents where you might see your name in there. What happens is a lot of them, they're still in paper format. So they exist, but literally the only way to go see it is to go there. So that's the other really big roadblock we have, Georgina, I think, is like, who can really afford to like travel all the way to Spain, take time off from work, and like dig through stuff? It's a real privilege for us that can do that work. The other piece I was going to mention, and this is just, I want to just kind of expose some of my own ignorance along the way, is there is a real big distinction too, though, between the Castilian side and those persons whose family come from Catalonia and Barcelona. And the unusual thing that's happening there is because it was such a Mediterranean powerhouse and so much economic activity, and we all probably know about the Cairo Geniza records, and how those were preserved, that talk about all through the Middle Ages, how Jews are kind of doing all kinds of economic transactions all across Europe and the Mediterranean. But in the records from Catalonia, I was shocked. You can go and work in notary archives, and they actually have records that really can go back to the 1200s. They might get an extra 100 or 200 years that's more
Right.
extensive. And I was going to show you a picture just how nuts this is, because I was just flabbergasted, like, oh my gosh, this is just amazing. So let's see, share here. And I'm just
I
going to,
love the notary records. They're really like very salacious.
yeah.
Oh my God, this looks like the table in the archive in Gran Palma with the Inquisition books. Just like it. I have a picture just like it from the Canary Islands. Wow.
What's so cool about this, Gina and friends and Georgina, is that you look at this notary archive. So I had asked the archivist, so are there, because I was looking for the Pesa family or Pesach family in Zaragoza, and I was at the Royal Academy of Notaries, the Royal College of Notaries. And I said, are there any notaries that work with Jewish documents? And the archivist like kind of looks at me and she says, like, which one? They're like tons. Like, what are you talking about? And so what she did is she said, well, yeah, here's a list of the notaries, but there's no index, right? And I said, like, okay, so I said, just bring me the first like stack. And so this is about like 25 linear centimeters of documents. There's no index.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, so you literally just turning pages, trying to figure out where are, and that's the other big challenge is there are in some cases a lot of records, but we just don't know anything about them. And it's only because of work like Genie or really specific scholars that are interested parties are really pursuing this stuff that we actually know anything. So I just wanted to show you that stack because
So
that's
now leave it up a minute because I actually, Roger, I want to give a tip about this.
oh,
And this
good.
is really important. If you manage to get yourself over to Spain or Portugal, and Portugal's records are just a wheat better, but they were stolen a lot. They allow you normally to take in a phone or an iPad into the reading room, and many times not even a pencil, you have to use theirs, and it's one of those school pencils to fill in the bubbles. I mean, so with your iPad, when you finally find, let's say, this stack, and you have 3 hours, just boom, 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 take as many pictures as you can. Don't bother reading them. Don't bother trying to find them. Don't bother looking for the name of your family. Don't bother doing anything except taking as many shots of you as you can of this, okay? And then when you go home, you print this out, you sit there and you struggle over it, but you don't have the time ever physically to read this stuff when you're on board over there. So that's just my big #1 tip for you. If you ever get yourself over there and you're faced with this in front of you, which we, Roger and I have many times been faced with this in front of us.
May I add, I'm asking this because many of us became Spanish citizens through Marcos Alonso de la Garza Falcón. It seems that FCGE and also Portugal's, the Jewish community knows about Marcos Alonso. There's no records that will say Marcos Alonso was practicing Judaism or was a crypto-Jewish. But then we go to Constanza de la Garza, but somehow there's this disconnection. They don't want to tell us, was she his mom? Was she the grandmother? There's so that's why I wanted to go back and make this connection. But it's like they know about Marcos Alonso, but they're withholding the information that makes him a crypto Jew, and that they're accepting him as a crypto Jew. So that's why I wanted to see where can we find more records, or where can we go and scan those records so we can find the connection. Why was he labeled as a crypto Jew, and many obtained the citizenship through him, and also Carvajal and Diego de Montemayor, all of those. So
Yeah, but Carvajal specifically, because that's where I've done most of my work. Carvajal specifically, there's, I even sent you one once, the Inquisition of Évora, the Inquisition of this, the Inquisition of that. In the case of Carvajal, I think that you would have to literally go through Inquisition records. I mean, that's pretty much where you're going to find what you're looking for, is going through Inquisition records. And again, like, Roger said, this is time consuming, this is costly, super costly to do this, but you will find it, Georgina. You will find it there. I mean, I've seen Carvajal stuff and Montemayor. It's very clear, Does anybody,
Ellie has a question. Ellie, do you want to open your microphone? Your hand is up. I assume that means you want to ask a question.
Do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you first of all for the project. I have a question to Dr. Roger Martinez Davila. I read your book, Creating Conversos, which is a very interesting book, of course. But to be honest with you, I've been a bit disappointed. And I will tell you why. Because I am fascinated by the figure of the chief rabbi of Burgos, Solomon Halevi, alias Pablo de Santa Maria. I have been looking for bibliography, for books about his life, and the books about his decision to convert, why he converted. Himself and his family, his children, and even his wife after a few years. In short, I've been looking for years about books about his life. Can you give me some titles of books I can get about his life and about the consequences of his decisions? I'm sorry, just a second. Yes. Michelle, I'm on Zoom right now. I'm sorry. Yes. Excuse me.
I love this. I love that we actually get to see parts of each other's lives, which just makes this so personal. Ellie, like I hear you. I am so frustrated as well in terms of like, how do we really understand a person like Pablo de Santa Maria? And he's been described to me by many friends as the ultimate traitor inside of Judaism and Sephardic Judaism. The two books that I would recommend right away, and I'm going to put this in the chat.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I do not read Spanish and speak Spanish. I used to, but I forgot all of my Spanish. I need French or English.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's perfectly understandable. I think the challenge is that for American audiences, we really don't, and English-speaking audiences, we're less familiar with him because it hasn't been historically an issue that's been important to Sephardic Jews. The ones that I think are really useful, and this is just a suggestion, and I put them in here. We have P.L. Serrano's Los Conversos, that Pablo de Santa Maria and Alfonso de Cartagena, his son, And then the other one that below that is the book Alvaro Garcia de Santa Maria. Now, a lot of these texts now are available electronically through the internet. You can find bootleg or, you know, copies of them as a PDF. And honestly, you know, often, you know, cutting and pasting right out of the book into Google Translate can get you 90% of the way there. I think that's the best way maybe to approach it, because there are no texts in English that really speak to these figures, because they're kind of in some ways detested, right? Why would I want to study someone who left the faith? Now, I will say about the conversion, what we know from these two books, so this is from Professor Cartagena and Professor Serrano, is that they indicate that that Pablo de Santa Maria converted because he had a vision of the Virgin Mary, and that was what prompted him to take both the name and then to convert to Christianity. So that is the origin story, that mythology of why he converted. Now, I think there are like a lot of fascinating reasons why he would convert too, in terms of just the pure like political, economic, and prestige that would come from converting. And the last point I would just make about this is, I think, obviously the really dirty little secret about the Roman Catholic Church in the 1400s was, what's great about rabbis is they can have kids. Priests can't have kids legitimately, even though it happened all the time. Now, Pablo has three sons. He has Alfonso de Cartagena, who will become one bishop in one area. We'll have Gonzalo Garcia de Santaria, another bishop in another area. Another son is like a royal historian who's working in there. So immediately, and then they have Alfonso Rodriguez de Malduenda, who's a cousin who becomes a head of monasteries. And so right away, what's interesting is you have basically rabbis running the Roman Catholic Church in the 1400s. That's the dirty little secret. And so I think the open question then is, to what extent did they kind of bring practices and bring kind of ways of knowing God and living into the church that we don't even like, we take for granted now, like, oh, well, that's Catholic. No, it's not Catholic, it's something else. So anyway, that's all I have to say. Jeannie.
And I want to follow, Ellie, I'm holding the book in my hand. You can't see it because I have a
Put it
background.
in front of you. Put it in front of you. Nope, didn't work. Okay.
Okay, so I'm holding in my hand the book that Roger was just talking about. I refer to it all the time. Los conversos de Paulo de Santa Maria y Alonso de Cartagena. It's in my hand.
Yeah, but it is a book written
Spanish.
It was written, right.
back then in the 15th century in Old Spanish, what they call Old Spanish.
Correct. It is in Spanish. What I was going to suggest to you, because it is available on several university, I have it physically, but it's available on several university websites. And I am going to, for many books that are available on university websites, you can always contact them and have them put you in touch with an intern that can possibly scan this for you for a fee, and then get it electronically. If the PDF electronic is not available already, you can have someone scan this in, and then you can put it into Google Translate, because this book is literally where you're going to find what you're looking for. It's in Spanish.
Okay, just one more word to answer back to Dr. Davila, is that the other side of the fascinating face is that not only he converted to Christianity, but he went on to become bishop and archbishop, and the author of the most anti-Jewish laws.
Right.
He was actually, I mean, the one who went out of his way to convert all the Jews of Spain through laws, through legal means. If I may use these terms, that's also what I mean. I cannot say fascinated me, but I mean, I think this is one case in the whole history. I mean, we have never seen that. We have seen rabbis or even great rabbis to become Christian, but not going that way as to turn so much against their own people. That's why. Okay. Anyway,
I think, Ellie, you're really expressing, I think, the central debate about him. And I so appreciate these questions, because how do we reconcile, the stories about him? Because I know those stories are very much, and this is part of that Lachrymose school of Judaic scholarship, which is about, the extent to which, conversos are really involved in the process of like persecuting their own families, persecuting their own community they had come from. So we do have these. I think these are the ordinances of Valladolid that are published, that are basically kind of start to establish this separation of families, of communities. Probably some of the really first pieces we see about like how do we actually create physical barriers between communities. So I've seen those as well. The other thing that's really complicated for me, which I don't know how to understand, and it's really a question back to the audience, is that, okay, we have these laws that are being promulgated and being pushed forward, but then simultaneously in Burgos, in the municipal archive of Burgos, I found letters coming from the Santa Maria family being sent out of the city saying, do not oppress convert Jews that have converted to Christianity, but also if a Jew was forced to convert, they should be allowed to revert to their religion. I've never seen that letter ever referred to in any text, and I referred to it in mine because, well, then which is it? Is he kind of pushing this line, or is he also doing that? And then I just kind of look at the facts on the ground. The facts on the ground, just as a micro study in Plasencia, was okay. I'm going to take apart the cathedral records, and I always follow the money. The money tells the story,
Oh,
right? And so
yeah.
this case, when the church is leasing all this property,
You are Jewish after all.
yeah, when they're leasing all this property to everybody, then you realize all of a sudden the Santa Marias and Carvajals are leasing all this property to Jews and Muslims that never could rent property before. So it's really hard to make sense of like, well, they're granting more access to this an autonomy here, but also the other part of it is pretty distasteful, is that they also increase the rents a lot. So hey, you can rent property from the church, but we're going to charge you double what we charge a Christian. So it's kind of both at the same time. There's more access, but then it's about money.
But there are also stories of others with disputations that would cause problems to the Jews because they were Jewish themselves originally, and so they knew how to censor the Talmud, or they knew how to have these disputations and cut down the rabbis and cause all these problems. So yes, he may have been the epitome of it, but there were definitely, he wasn't the only one, unfortunately. I'm going to take the opportunity because Roger, you mentioned a Pesach family. Did I hear you right? From Saragossa. Do you know? So I've been looking like for this forever. There is this group of people, and I know some of them at least went through Greece, that they all have names that are related to Passover. I've met a Hametz, I've met Karpas, and no, and some of them went through Greece, and so I thought it was a Greek thing. Um, but I'm wondering if now you're saying it's from Saragossa, maybe did you come across other people with names related to Pesach and Passover and
Yeah. And then I want to pass this over to Genie as well in just a second, about how she's encountered these different types of names. It's so very odd that you're asking this question, because the records I was just showing you again were from Zaragoza for the Pesach family. And actually, I have a video open already, just purely coincidental, that is actually turning through the notary pages and finding the Pesach family in it. I'll show it to you really quickly, because when I found this record, and it was like this stack of like, this, really tall records, and like literally my friend and client's name popped out. It was like Ari Pesa. It was like, this is your name. This is your relative from like 500 years ago. And I emailed him immediately the image. Let me show you, because it is the craziest thing in the world. Um, let me find this. It's not there.
It was Zvi Chametz and Greg Karpas. That's who I meant.
The Karpas killed me.
Chametz also doesn't make any sense. I mean, why would somebody want their name to be Chametz? But I'm guessing it was this community that just had a Passover connection.
So you see this book here, right? And a video. So there's some sound in here, but just pay no attention. It's my camera making a lot of noise. And this is from 1416. I'm going to point to Pesach in just a second. This is a real problem, right? Just trying to read it. It was awful. And now you're going to see it. So it says here, Ari Adin Pesach.
Oh, I can't read that.
So, I mean, what's just amazing about this stuff is that, you know, sometimes it just kind of jumps out at you. But yeah, this is a very, very typical approach. We don't realize. I didn't even realize it until I encountered this story with Ari, with my friend. I had not realized how prevalent that was. So we see that in Catalonia. We see it also in Zaragoza. I'm not sure as much in Castile because we do know like different families are in different areas. So the Benaviste family is from Catalonia. The Levy family is from Toledo, but also Burgos. You have the Senor family that's from Segovia. There really are regional kind of, you know, families. Anyway, but what about you, Genie? Have you seen that type of experience too of like these kind of religious names embedded inside of surnames?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Mostly I've seen it in Portugal. So how are they identified? Because everybody had aliases, and especially in Portugal, as they were being caught in the Inquisition, you know, you had 5, 6 different aliases. However, the minute in 1596 that many of them showed up in Amsterdam, then that was the moment, and those records are on my website as well, by the way. So that was the moment that you were able to see. Let's say that the family, I'll make this up, was Gabay. And then it became Mendez. Okay, then they went to Amsterdam. Most of them did not take back their Gabay name. Most of them made a new religious name when they got up to Amsterdam. So now we're talking about 3 aliases. We have the Gabay, we have Mendez, and now they call themselves Israel. And they continue to do business with Portugal, but they don't use any of these 3 names. So now they go back and continue doing business with Portugal from Amsterdam, and then they make up the name, I don't know, whatever, Alvarez. So the name that they are making up in Amsterdam, that kind of third middle name, that's where you see all the religious connotations come in. That name, whether it was in gratitude for having gotten out of Portugal, because in my head it was for crying out loud, do business with London. Why go back to, you know, doing business with Portugal? But that's where I saw the huge incident of the names being taken as religious names, whether it was, you know, Ronaldo or Gustavo, and now it became Baruch. And so they just started taking Baruch. Israel is a very common name up there. So that's, Roger, where I saw it was in the Portugal portion. But the names, you know, were super religious because, you know, the name of the 3 kings, Melchor, you know, Gaspari, Baltasar, just about every single one of my male relatives are named after the 3 kings from a Catholic point of view. So, anybody have any questions?
I always found it interesting. First names is the Isabellas that I find among Jews or conversos, or like the prevalence of the name Isabella. To me, I just don't understand it.
Oh, because of Queen. Now, my mom's name was
Right.
Isabella. Right, but her first name was actually Queen, like Malca. In other words, my mom's name was Queen Isabel, like literally baptized Queen Isabel. You know, yes, it's not understandable.
Yeah, something that's continued. So I'm opening it up to everybody else as well. I know that we have plenty that we talk about as well, but we're really encouraging you to add to your questions here. I know that there was something that came up last week, and I'm trying to find my notes for it, but of course now I don't have it. Yes, Roger?
I have a question maybe back to Georgina and just kind of the panelists and other people in the room, which is, since we've been talking about these historical uses of names and how they've been adapted over time, what do y'all see in contemporary society? What do you see from contemporary crypto Jews or folks that are recovering their Jewish heritage? Are those names changing, or are they sticking? I'm just curious how, what that phenomena looks like today.
Well, one thing that I noticed is that in the 1950s, most people were named Maria. Maria this, Maria that. For example,
Sorry.
my mom's sister was Maria Teresa, and then my mom was Maria Guadalupe. And so a lot of saints, it's like trying, but not just in Mexico, I think everywhere, even Spain, you will find that a lot of the name Maria is like a stamp. And then on males will be Jose or Juan. And so in a way, they were trying to hide the past. And one way to do that was by naming the kids with those names, most of them. Now there's so many new names, but I don't see that pattern continuing. I don't know.
Yeah, it kind of does. I mean, I am Maria Eugenia. My sister is Maria Isabel. I mean, we're talking about names from the 50s. Then obviously I use Genie, and I never took away the Maria, but it's there. But I think it's a thing of the church, Georgina, because you're not allowed, when you do a baptism still today, you need to have a quote unquote Catholic name attached. So for example, when I named my daughter, my son and my daughter, I named her Nicole, I had to add Christine. When I named my son Sergio, I had to add St. George, like George, St. George. So I don't know if that still goes on, because obviously I haven't been in the church in 30 years, but that's why I named my children, had to have the Catholic name to be able to be baptized. Maybe somebody knows that here, I don't know.
Yeah, please do feel free, Diane. Yeah, you can open your microphone.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. There are liturgical calendars with names on them. When I started doing family history, and I have all sorts of people in my background, one of my cousins gave me a copy of one of those so that you would know, have some indication of when that person was born, because they were named that, like Maria Eugenia or something like that. And they took the names from the calendars, the saints days. It was sort of like a book of hours, going forward to fairly recently. And anyway, that was the case. I have a question. We know a lot about the De la Cueva family in Mexico from Inquisition records. And a lot of people who were pulled into the Inquisition were pulled from areas outside of Mexico City, because the Inquisition courts were in Mexico City. I know of one individual who was pulled from Santa Fe twice to be tried in Mexico City. I can't imagine the journey, but in those days. But my question is, was there any kind of evidence of what life was like in Mexico City? Because it was not only the seat of the Inquisition, but it was the jumping off place for the rest of Mexico going north. Were there any kind of Jewish connections, or was everything really, really hidden? I know you mentioned, Roger, somewhere along the line that there were some people from some traders or something from Syria who came and taught some things, but it seems as if everything was lost because there were no rabbis. The rabbis didn't go to Mexico. There were no teachers. So it was sort of everyone on their own. Is there any evidence that there was a connection between this family and that family as Jews?
I'm going to defer to others first, and then I'll pick up off of there. It's a great question. So the question is, what is the connection between these families? And then to what extent are they really, is it a Jewish connection more than just, oh, we know there's a familial connection?
Mhm.
I know Nuevo León has some connections to New Mexico through Captain Francisco de la Garza. And like I said, I don't know exactly how they were living a Jewish life, Marcos Alonso, to be considered a crypto Jew, but he was considered a crypto Jew. But I know there were connections between New Mexico and Nuevo León. The issue is, how do we prove it? And we only have census, and we have a few documents to prove it, and it's very hard for some organizations to approve it as such. But I'm thinking we kept going up north, like Nuevo León, Texas, New Mexico, because we wanted to be, I read somewhere that we wanted to be close to the Apaches, because the Apaches were very protective of their area. So therefore, even though we were endangering our people, the closer we were to them, the Catholic Church wouldn't follow us. So that's why we kept going norther and norther up there. But that's the only thing that I heard, that because we wanted to be close to the Apaches, because they were very protective of their land. And but I know there were connections between New Mexico and Nuevo León. Now to Zacatecas too, but they kept going up. So the people that were left in Zacatecas, probably they already forgot that they're crypto Jewish or their Jewish background. But the one that kept going up north, they kept wanting to hide it. And the only way is to stay away from the Inquisition, which was in Mexico City. And I think Veracruz, there was also another Inquisition place there. So we just wanted to be further away from them. So closer to the Apaches, where the Native Americans were the only way that the Catholic Church wouldn't follow us. I know in Nuevo León we had an empty church. We call it a coit church. It was empty. It was there. It had everything, but no priest, no bell. It didn't have a bell, because I guess in case they will come, someone would just go in and pretend to be a priest. But we do have an empty church in Nuevo León, and so yeah.
I do have something to add to the first part, I believe, Diane, of your question. So what was the connection of to the Judaism, I believe? How did they express it? So, for example, when you're looking at Inquisition records in Spain and Portugal, it's super obvious. This one got taken in, he didn't eat pig. The other one didn't do this. The other one washed his clothes on Shabbat. And so everything was a religious connection in such a way, meaning actually not following the laws. So then when you get to the Mexican Inquisition records, the first thing that called my attention as I started, reading those, is the crimes were things like putting a picture of Jesus on the bottom of your shoe and running around with it. And so like you were stepping on the Jesus face the whole time, or taking a picture of, let's say, the Virgin or one of the virgins or whatever it was, and desecrating it as well in different ways. But those are not really, let's say, a Jewish connection. But that was, let's say, by and far in Mexico, those were crimes, such as, like in Lima, Peru, just because in every section they were different. In Lima, Peru, it was mostly things that could be construed as witchcraft. And that was taken in. It's not that they were witches. I mean, I'm sure back in the day I would have been burned as a witch, but it was just, we can see some of that. What stood out for me in the Mexican Inquisition records, by and large, was the use of the hidden mezuzahs. In many things, there's books that have been written, and so you see one little statue, you see another one. I'll use the word privileged to have been in places where I have been shown these things coming down from the family. Somebody that has that is Lorenzo Trujillo, the mariachi that knows he has this lineage. He has some beautiful pieces. So they kept their, and mostly mezuzah related. So as far as I've been able to see, this has been, the one connection has been mezuzah related.
The other one is attestation of having given a child a bris.
That I didn't know.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Oh, yes. In one of the brothers of one of my ancestresses, evidence was brought that the three brothers were circumcised by friends who had been swimming in the river with them. This is a little bit before the time of Nuevo Leon. This is in the early days before 1680. But that's in the Inquisition records.
That's so interesting.
That's
I don't
interesting
know
because
how
that
many
also-
generations kept it up, though, because I think
That's
that there was
also religious.
rapid
Yeah.
integration.
I want to make sure that everybody is also noticing that things are going on in the chat.
Yeah.
So I want you to listen, but I also want you to read because there
Yeah.
are some interesting things going on in the chat as well. And now, Roger, before you talked, I wanted to make sure that people would see because people are putting things. Please,
Yeah,
Roger.
no, this was really, I think, super helpful to hear about the mezuzahs, to hear about the bris.
Yeah.
Those pieces are really important. I mean, part of it is a question back, which would be, okay, so what defines Jewish religious life, and to what extent can that happen in a surveillance state, right? So can you live as a Jew as you're being watched? And so I think, for folks that have grown up with a religion and practice it, I think you could walk through your daily life and figure out, okay, what can I do? What can I not do? I think that would be creates the open.
Yeah. As I was born in Mexico, so one thing that I noticed between Cadereyta, which that's where my mom's family is from, very Sephardic, very endogamous, to a more popular area close to Monterrey, which is the city, and many people came from other states to live closer to the city, was that the priest will walk several with people. They will go around the houses 3 times a day or once a day, and they will bless those houses, and they will not bless the houses that people didn't go to church. So my mom was one of them. My mom grew up in Cadereyta, where they were mostly Sephardic, and they were not forced to go to church. But then moving to the city, the pressure of Catholicism was so much that if you didn't go on Sunday to church or you didn't send your kids to church, they will make everybody not like you or pressure you. So they will pass by your house and they will bless all these houses, but they will left out your house. They will not bless your house, and then they will not allow their kids play with us or whoever didn't go to church. So yes, I think that growing up as a crypto Jew and not knowing, it was very difficult. I didn't know why my mom was so different or my parents were so different. Why my grandmother didn't go to church. Why she would pray in a corner against the wall, and she didn't have images. compared to everybody in the city having a Virgin Mary hanging and going to church. So you will start thinking, why are we so different? And yet we didn't know why, because there were no internet, no computers, no Facebook. So there was no way to find out the truth. And then now with with the internet and Zoom and all of this, it's like, oh, it makes sense now. Why they were
Roger,
so
I know you have some images to share, but Georgina, to what you just said, I think that if they put 400 of us in the same room, or 500, we're all going to say the same thing, because I was in Catholic school from K through university, had to go to church every Sunday. My parents didn't go, and my grandparents didn't go, my maternal grandparents. So, they just didn't go into a church, period, the end, but they had their children going in there, right? My sister and I. And we were not ostracized, but looked down upon. The priest would call my mom, and this is not, in a village. This is Miami, Florida, in the 60s. Why are your kids in church and you're not here? So this went on my entire life. I think that for a they also did not have any statues. My mom just had icons. She had Greek icons, which were not 3D images. So these are just things that we grow up with as descendants. And, I think we all had the same experience. I think Roger has something he wants to show.
Yeah, I was just, I think the other question was a really great one, Diane, was about, well, how are they practicing religion? I mean, and there are no tours, when we were working on the Fractured Faiths exhibition in New Mexico, I always think of David Gitlitz, our departed colleague, may his memory be a blessing, just a wonderful person. And he said, Roger, we're not going to find a Torah buried in the backyard. It's just not going to happen. That's a death sentence. So he said,
Yeah.
absolutely right. So then what do you have then to practice? So the question made me think really quick, like, oh, you know what? I was just looking at Inquisition record just about 2 weeks ago on this. And so I was working with a family trying to figure out a little bit more about their family. And this is actually from Spain, but this is a way of saying, okay, how do you practice Judaism in secret without anyone knowing? So this Inquisition record from Lerena, so that's a regional kind of capital for the Inquisition in southwestern Spain. Here's a case for process a Judaizer, Luis Jimenez. And then if we go to the record, this is at the National Historic Archive. We're lucky it's digitized. It's in the 1530s. And then this is where we can see, a little bit about him. So it's here, Luis, Luys, Jimenez is the abbreviation, who's being held in prison. And he is a resident of the city of Merida. But what's really interesting is you start to look through the record, you get all these testaments. So this is how we know someone is a crypto Jew. So first is the first witness, Pedro Alonso, who's saying this guy is guilty. He's really a Jew from Portugal. That he's and we're looking for behaviors, right? Oh, he eats milk with honey. Or we have other records for people mentioning, oh, Luis Jimenez, he washes his clothing on Sundays, so on the day of rest. Another bad sign. The most important thing that I came across this record, which I really had forgotten about, was that, oh, well, how do we know that they're actually practicing? So Manuel Alvarez says, oh, he reads a book, the Old Testament. So by actually going back to the Christian Bible, you can practice Judaism. And what is he reading inside the Old Testament? Inside the Old Testament, and this is where the confession comes, which is a forced confession. So on the 12th of September, 1535, Luis Jimenez says, yeah, a lot of times I'm reading the Bible and I'm looking for figures from the Old Testament and specifically reading about Moses, and I'm reading about Daniel and the Babylonian exile, and that willingness to continue to persevere in an age of discrimination. So in this respect, you know, is there kind of Jewish practice that's going on here? Let me just stop sharing. Or is it almost just Jewish memory, which is, I don't know how to practice, but I can get somewhat of the way back to my religion by telling myself the stories that are in the Old Testament that remind me of who we were. But that's
I
my
think
question.
passed on. I think it's passed on. Like I just put my grandfather, he would teach my dad how to lower his blood pressure by washing his hands, alternating hands. But he didn't know he was doing Netilat Yadayim. He was just using it for lowering blood pressure. But then back then he will be in the Inquisition if they find out he did that as witchcraft or something else. Yeah.
Witchcraft, I know. The witchcraft is a big deal. And I learned all my stuff through food, you know, checking for blood in the eggs and checking the, you know, the leaves for insects. You know, my grandmother was big on this whole passing along the religion in the food. So I think that but we do know that most of it was a matriarchal societies. Wherever we were in Portugal or we were in Spain, incumbent on the women to pass on the religion. I know with Luis de Carvajal, specifically when he was in the Pimentel home at the age of 13, 14, it was the men passing it on at bat mitzvah or mitzvah age. But in general, it was women passing this stuff on. So I think it's just incredible.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting when we have Professor Melamed coming. So like I said, I encourage that. That's really what she says. Susanna, you had something to say or ask?
Yeah, I have to go in a minute for another Zoom that's starting imminently. But I wonder if any of you have ever met this person. About 30 years ago, I met a man. He's an anthropologist. His last name is Sines. I don't recall his first name. His family kept their itinerary when his father on his deathbed said, by the way, we're Jewish. And he said, this is where we came from, you know, from Spain. They went to, was through Recife, Brazil, and then up through, you know, north of there into Texas. And this professor, you know, didn't take any of this for granted. And he actually did research. He said, you know, he said that he knew that it was true because there were places in this itinerary that don't exist, you know, towns that don't exist anymore, but did back then. And he went to Spain, and in the course of his own research for his area of expertise in anthropology, he had the opportunity to take a side trip. Oh yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, all right. I have to grab that. To go to Spain and found the place his family came from and the synagogue they worshipped. It was like a place that was a synagogue that was not on any list of but it's, so yeah, so you've heard of him. Okay.
Well, now we all have. So thank you for bringing that up.
His story was the itinerary. The only other thing that I know of, Tomás Luis de Victoria, who is an early Renaissance composer, is Jewish on his mother's side, and his mother's family kept their genealogy. He was a priest. His grandparents converted. His great grandparents ran away to Portugal, and I don't know what happened to them there, but one can imagine. Anyway, I have to leave. Sorry. I'll see you next
thank
time.
you all. We're gonna end it anyway. So thank you. That was a really interesting way to close this out, and I think we brought up a whole bunch of things here. So I thank
Say
everybody.
one last thing. I never have one last thing, but if you will just one last thing. For those of you that follow your DNA recently, very recently, MyHeritage has changed. Has updated their ethnicity estimates. So you go into the website and you put update, it takes about a day. And weirdly enough, hundreds of people have written me about this in the last 2 months. Weirdly enough, what was showing up as a lot of Ashkenazi DNA is now showing up as Balkan. But if you do follow your DNA, I know, right? I am now 11% Balkan. So if you do follow those estimates with my heritage, I suggest you go in there and get your new ethnicity estimate. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you. Now that's an important point. So thank you for ending on that. And I hope that we brought up some interesting. Yes, we do wander a lot. And like I said, I hope everybody is reading through the chat also, because there are things all over. And I hope that this is the first of a few conversations, because we brought up things that otherwise probably wouldn't have come up. So thank you. And I encourage you to continue to share and to participate. And thank you to our panelists especially, and to Diane for joining us as well as helping, and for all of you with questions.